projects here through the different presentations and performances, and then translates into these various locations of Kukulitikal. It works in different ways in each of these projects, but it comes through whether through the use of family archive material, whether through the use of autoethnographies or narratives of yourself, and how this personal does different kinds of work through the projects. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was really struck by the kind of commitment to starting from a very lived, experience, or at the very least, relating back whatever work was being done back, to the kind of the familial. I think your work, did that kind of wind back into the personal and the familial. And I think, so as someone who's in an anthropology department, as someone who's trained as an anthropologist, I have to fight at every juncture, and now I have to fight for my students to claim this space of the personal as a valid, legitimate starting point. And this particularly goes for students of color, right? That this is a valid beginning to rethink, unthink, and make research that is critical and timely and important. And so it was really inspiring to see that in all of your work.
And it can also be a legitimate ending point, as some of the projects showed, where you start somewhere else and then bring it back to that. So to fight for that legitimation on these both of these things.
Yeah. The other thing we started to talk about, but then we I don't know what happened. I think a friend popped in. So we started to talk about the different registers and tenses of the decolonial, right? And we started to think about how the decolonial as a kind of way of thinking and a way of acting played out in each of your performances and pieces. And so we got as far as that, and then we stopped. Because I felt like there were some distinctions, right, in how you were animating the decolonial. So one way that I saw very clearly was that it was a motivation for claiming space, right? So that came out in your project, I thought quite clearly. It was a claim literally to space, to the space of the performance hall, right? Whereas I think in other presentations, language became kind of the center of the decolonial project, and that came through in the performance, but then also in the kind of the meta performance of talking through language. That came out in your performance as well as in yours.
Yeah, and I think especially thinking about your performance, the decolonial as a way to claim what is not there, like this figure or this past or this archive that is actually no longer there, and to create it, so sort of as a space of this mix of fantasy and future from the past that has been erased and that has been ignored. So that also became a way in which the decolonial came through in that sense.
And then there was the idea of participation, which I think came out most clearly in your piece, right? So the idea that participation, or creating modes of participation and engagement, can actually be a decolonial impulse, right? To make with, and to share with and learn with others actually becomes a key area by which we can undo, right, understandings of what counts as valid knowledge.
Yeah. Right? And I think that also becomes a way to then think about the question of beyond representation, right? There was a lot of discussion on representation, what it does, why it's needed, how can we do it in different ways and in different registers. But then also to start thinking about, okay, so what is beyond representation? And that also came up in many projects because, for example, when you talk about activism and organizing in spaces that are sometimes even people of color spaces, but then all these tensions around gender, around class, around other, around other axes of power that come up in those spaces becomes a way for us to then think about beyond, what lies beyond representation. If representation is achieved in whatever form, in whatever means, then how do we go forward from there? What are the other ways in which we think about it?
And I think that came out in your piece in terms of thinking through materiality, right? And the materiality of colonization, or the decolonization of materiality, as it were. And I thought that was quite a provocative push, right? Because you actually looked at representation, but then kind of took us away in some ways from representation and centered the materiality of your work. And I thought that was brilliant and really important for us to think with, right? And we can stop there,
Yeah, we can stop there for now. Think of something.
So maybe what we can do is, yeah, we can open it up.
Questions, comments?
So yeah, so just open up to the audience on any questions you may have to any of the others or all of them. Yeah.
Hi everybody, my name's Elaine. I'm currently an applied theater student here, well, almost finishing now. Thank you for all of your presentations. I think, going back there and being personal, they were all very moving. And I was very moved by everyone's story. I'm not quite sure what my question is. I'm kind of grappling as a mixed race person. I'm interested in what the diaspora means for someone like me and what this third space is. I don't know if that's a question or, yeah, if anyone wants to. What is the diaspora for someone who is mixed race?
Should we maybe take another question and
Sure,
comment,
yeah.
and then we can go around?
Other questions that